In the grand arena of life, every man faces his own unique seasons, times of triumph, struggle, growth, and reflection. Your legacy is forged not just by the challenges you face, but by the quality of your thoughts and actions. Welcome to the Legacy Podcast with Ernest Wood, where we explore the path to true happiness, enduring legacy, and becoming the man you're meant to be.
Hey, welcome to the Legacy Podcast with Ernest Wood. Today we have a fantastic guest. He is a he said he was a nomad when he was growing up. He moved all over this place. He's a veteran, 20 years in the Marine Corps. He did a stints in Iraq, Afghanistan, all over the place. He has a bachelor's degree. He's also went and got his master's in rehab counseling. Never used it. He'll tell you about that probably later. And then he found that pottery is something that's a therapeutic for people. And he started an LLC around that. He also does some beekeeping, which is awesome. I love bees. Just got to say that. I have to say. He also has a podcast. It's super cool. And you go down some rabbit holes and it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun podcast to listen to. He'll talk a little bit about that. But Aaron has his own, his definition of legacy and happiness. He's found it and he's been able to get there. And I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that right now. So Aaron, go ahead and take it away for a few.
Okay. So, wow, I haven't even I've thought of legacy a little bit, knowing that this podcast was coming up and wondering, the natural legacy we all think about is our children and maybe everybody's children to some extent, the world we're leaving them. And, I guess I sum it up best with the story I've already told on my podcast, the story that most people have heard, most likely. And it's called Make a Difference for that one, right? So that's kind of my whole leave a legacy, I guess, thought. And the story goes back to a guy walking on the beach. I don't know if this is a true story or not, and it really doesn't matter. So, but this guy walking on the beach, older guy, maybe let's just put him in his 60s. I don't even know. And, no offense to anybody in their 60s, but he's walking along the beach on his vacation. And he sees in the distance, well, first of all, he sees the beach in front of him, and there's starfish all over the beach. I'm not sure where he was in the world, but we don't need to know that for the purpose of my story. So he's walking along the beach, starfish on the beach, and he sees a young boy, maybe 6 or 7, coming his way on the beach. And, and he can't quite figure out what the boy's doing, but he walks on, and he knows he'll figure it out as he gets closer. And so they're coming into close proximity, and he finally sees this boy is stopping and picking up a starfish and throwing it in the ocean. Well, and sounds like an angry guy, in my opinion, and that's fine. I mean, at least he's getting it out, I guess. But he's like, "What are you doing? Don't you see this whole beach is littered with starfish? You're never gonna make a difference." And the boy looks like he thinks about it for a second. He looks down to starfish. He picks up another one, chucks it in the ocean, and looks back at the guy and said, "I made a difference for that one." And that really sums up a lot of, well, every aspect of my life. So whether it's pottery workshops, one-on-one or in groups, and I'm teaching them so much. The illusion or the storefront, I guess, is that I'm teaching you how to make something out of pottery. But really what I'm doing behind the scenes of that, or subconsciously, is I'm getting them to spend some quiet time with themselves and with their body and in this moment, however long it lasts. And, and And this is an example of making a difference for that one and for each one. And sometimes I have a pottery workshop and I'm all set up and ready to go, and one person shows up. Man, that's amazing because I get to really pour into that person and I get to really, kind of see where they're going with their pottery and kind of give them, some guidance before they even get there, perhaps. Or I encourage them to be gentle and careful with themselves. Sometimes I even breathe for them. Art, what is it? Well, I don't know what breathing for them is, but I was trying to think of some fancy word to say for it. But really, they get anxious and they're kind of holding their breath, and I feel that anxiety and stress in the room, and I say, I just want to let you know, and I let it out, and I feel it on me, and then I'm like, why did I need to breathe out like that? What is going on? And I locate them and I see them stressed up, holding their breath, worried about how their pottery is going to turn out and, maybe not trusting the process as much. And then I'm like, by the way, I'm breathing for you right now. And they're like, huh? What? Oh, I am holding my breath. And then, they go back to breathing normal. But really it's allowing people to in for 2 hours to kind of be in a mindful state where they're grounded and they're really grounded in this moment. If you ever work with your hands with anything, but with pottery, it's especially true with clay. You are brought wholeheartedly into that moment. And the thing I always like to tell to my classes, they're in the middle of it. We're an hour into 2 hours of making pottery. They've got all the lesson part of it down, and they're just figured it out with their hands. And I always like to reflect and say, you know what you're not thinking about right now? And they kind of look up startled from their pottery. Like I just woke them up from a dream almost. And they look up startled and they're like, what? And I'm like, everything that happens outside that door. And they think about it. And then they're like, wow, you're right. And I'm like, and then they're like, well, thanks for making us think of it again. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I wanted to make the point. And I said, don't worry, you'll get right back into it again. Get your hands back on your clay, and you're in your own little world again. And so I found it was therapeutic for me first as a transitioning lifelong Marine, where everything I was trained to do was how to kill somebody. Or how to assist in killing other people, Well, and I know it's not murder, it's state sanctioned, and these are kind of bad guys. So, in all ways you can look at it. But yeah, so that's kind of the focus of my life, and even beekeeping is kind of cool because I'm interacting with other bees. I'm learning how a hive functions. I'm learning how the bees function. I'm selling honey to people and or bartering. I love bartering better, you know. Um, but yeah, it's all about interacting. It's all about seeing that person, and people are so much more value than starfish. Um, and so seeing them and helping them on their journey, whatever it is. And I like to say lately, I like to throw a pebble in their pond. So, you can come at them heavy and say, if you fix these 5 things, then you'll have no problem. Or here's a list of things you need to work on based on our conversation. But I find it's a lot better to just take a little pebble and say, here's an idea. It may work, it may not. I'm going to throw this little pebble in your pond, and you can just see where the ripples go. And and that gives them kind of an ownership of it, of their growth and of their change. And so I'm not taking over full life support, which is the word I was thinking of earlier when I was talking about breathing. But isn't that like an exponentially effective legacy, right? Because we invest so much in our kids, and I think of them as a legacy, and I send them out in the world, and maybe they choose not to ever talk to me again, or maybe they stay connected the rest of their life. Maybe they need something from me, maybe they don't, but I send them out for better or worse into the world. I reflect upon a verse in Proverbs that says, children are like arrows in the hands of a warrior. So they're like, you know what? I kind of want to fix this industry. So I'm going to shoot my child into that industry. Not that I'm going to narrowly focus them on anything, but like into this part of the world. I'm sending good, an arrow of good into that part of the world. And so we can see that with our kids, but like, I am absolutely amazed by the power of dropping a pebble in somebody else's pond. And then
I
you
like
just
that.
stand back and you watch them grow. But go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I like that whole analogy of throwing the pebble in there. And I think I've learned that in my coaching also, because at first it was like I had to go through the process of learning what made me finally find my happiness, right?
Right.
I tried to read all the books in the world. I tried to go take all this coaching stuff, and it just wasn't happening. I just couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And then through that, I started figuring out it's not just throwing those five things like you just said. It's not throwing five things at somebody. You got to chat with them. You got to ask them questions, and then you give them little tiny things to fix. They can't fix the big ass boulder when you throw it in there,
Yeah.
right? They can, but when you give them that little pebble to kind of, hey, try this, or let's work on this part, and then it starts rippling to the next thing, and the ripple, like, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then pretty soon the whole pond had a little ripple through it, right?
Yeah.
And it's super cool. And just doing that, and yeah, man, if you only do it for one person, it matters.
Yeah.
It matters. If you help one person in your entire life, that person that you helped might help millions of people, or just help one other person. But if everybody just helped one person, how much better would our world be if
Yeah.
everybody was focused on helping one person instead of, yeah, I'm not helping anybody today. That one act of kindness. That's what I always say. I try to do
Yeah.
one act of kindness every single day.
Hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like this idea of paying it forward. It's kind of also like, um, I had another thought actually that I wanted to go to it, and
Go
that
ahead. Sorry about it.
related. No, no, you're good. It was related to the throwing a pebble in a pond. Like, when I say throwing a pebble in a pond, it's not haphazard. It's not, well, let me throw a lot of things up in the air and see which one affects you. It's more laser focused. And how does it get laser focused, I guess, is the next thing I want to talk about, and that's by listening, or at least that's my experience. So, it's listening to people, and I want to clarify because listening, it's got some kind of negative sides to it. I want to see it in levels. So let's say there's 5 levels of listening. And I'm not going to have one for every spot now that I think about it. But let's start at level 1, listening to argue, right? This is, some people, smart people, do not qualify this as even listening. This is just listening to make your next point. Like, I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, well, no, 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 wait, but, and you're like, well, did you hear the other things I said? And I'm like, no, I didn't care. I listened long enough to find something I could disagree with. And I would think that's level 1. And further up is like maybe level 3, and that's listening to help. So I'm going to listen to you, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I found a way to help you. Okay. And in a way, it's a little bit dismissive, but you get up to the top of the chain somewhere, at least as far as I've discovered, and it's listening to understand. So, and as you're listening to understand, you're like, well, I didn't understand something you said. And well, for instance, a simple example is, you said you're having a good day. I said, how was your day? You said good. And I'm wondering, what does good mean for you? What does that look like for you? I mean, does it mean you got up good? Whatever. And I don't fill in a lot of examples. I just leave that question hanging there. And I think about it, and they're like, well, I didn't sleep good last night. I haven't had breakfast. and I got an unexpected bill for $10,000. Why am I even saying good, as an example, and so people don't even really think about it, and they're not aware of what's going on for them most of the time. And so listening is really, well, I mean, for me, it makes it fun because then, I'm like, so what did you mean by okay? Or, I was listening to you and you said something that sounded like you don't like yourself. And so in my mind, I see you, the good side of you on one side, the bad side of you on the other side, and you're kind of, it seems like you're sabotaging yourself or hurting yourself. And and that's the point when I realize a more full picture of who they are by listening. And when I say listening, I'm not talking about the 30 seconds of listening understand is like listening for an hour, listening for an hour 3 times a week. So we're not talking about basic. Yeah, I listened to them for 5 minutes. I know where they're from and I know what their wife's name is, which is a good start. But it's before you drop a pebble in the pond, unless you want it to be a nuclear weapon. Then and that's what people are dropping on each other's ponds all the time. They know nothing at all, and they're like, "Oh, you've got anger problems," and the person's like, it not only sets them off, but it sets off everybody in their life is feeling the fallout from a misguided pebble. If you're just throwing random pebbles at people, I don't know about you, but people start throwing random pebbles at me. I'm like, do you want to fight or something? I mean, I'm a Marine and, I don't want to, but if you're going to keep throwing pebbles at me, that's going to need to stop, and I'll make it stop if I have to, So it's kind of like it's a laser guided pebble, just like I'm just going to drop it in the middle of the pond, the least amount of damage, the least amount of impact, and just see what it does. And most of the time people are like, okay, I'm watching the ripples here. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that makes sense and that fits, you know, and usually, they are atomic weapons. I mean, forgiveness. I mean, that is something that will change your entire life and the lives of everyone you know. When you stop drinking the poison to kill the other person that's secretly killing you, I mean, that's atomic level life change right there. And so you got to be careful with, and you want to be laser guided with listening, I guess. And I just came up with that. So you can have it. I don't have any slogans or copyrights on it. It's just kind of flowing out. But yeah, so
Dude,
that's really the secret to pebble dropping. Go ahead.
well, I do like the listening thing because so many of us, you're 100% correct. We only most of the time communication is, hey, I'm telling you something, but the person I'm telling is only listening long enough to get their whatever they need out of like, right? There's that full communication is truly listening and asking the right questions. And that's, being a coach or being a mentor, having the pottery thing where you get these people to open up and
Yeah.
express what they're. And I loved what you said earlier. There's two things that the process and breathing, because so many people like the process is the fun part most of the time, or it's the struggle,
Yeah.
it's the journey, right? Because when we get to where we're going or want to go, most of the time we're like, okay, what's the next thing, right? Because we start enjoying the process. It's like you have the process of making your mugs or whatever else you're making with the pottery. You have to know the process, you have to enjoy the process, you have to be there in the process
Yeah.
to make it work. And then breathing, it is so funny though how most people, when nowadays especially, is they forget to breathe. They do not breathe correctly. Most people
Yeah.
like there's we talked about it. Like 50% of people are mouth breathers now, and it's horrible for you. But or
Yeah.
they sit there and hold their breath, or they overbreathe. And just, man, the process. I love what you said about the process, having a process and doing a process and breathing.
Yeah.
Very, very important, man.
Well, and I want to talk some more about listening because listening is my favorite topic. And I'm investigating it by doing it. But the listening is kind of interesting that as you listen to somebody, that in actuality, even if you listen to an enemy or an opponent or a counterpart, I guess is the more neutral term, somebody across the table that's trying to get something from you and you want something from them, even when as you listen to them, as you listen to their feelings and label them, as you as you listen to their fears, and as you listen without any kind of solutions or any kind of input other than, hey, I want to understand a little bit more. Can I ask you a question? Or as long as you're listening and you're adding to that listening, then you're on the same side. And so when you throw the pebble in, it's not like, okay, I'm going to throw it up in the air and I'm going to run the other direction because I don't want to be around when it blows up. It's more like listening tells them, here's a pebble, and I'm going to sit here with you and I'm going to be on your side no matter what happens. And I'll be waiting to listen to how this goes for you. And so it's kind of like you're surrounding them, with companionship, and they're not alone by listen, but only by listening to understand. People want to be listened to so bad, especially, in these days. I remember, reflecting on how it's different from my childhood. Everybody sat around and, we played cards and everybody talked and what's going on and whatever happened to that old car you have and whatever. And everybody's kind of talking. And there were some people that were a little bit more prone to interrupting other people, but by and large, people were listening. They were interested. Oh, so you did fix that old tractor and it's running again. Wow, I didn't know that, and like, tell me more. What did you have to do? And I'm learning tractor maintenance. I'm learning preventive maintenance on vehicles in general. I'm learning how to be a farmer. I can learn I can learn anything by listening well and by really coming alongside them. And I help a farmer out a lot nowadays. I show up and help him. He raises cattle. Well, I guess that's not a farmer, that's a rancher, but you know. So yeah, he raises cattle. I help other people with their bees. And then afterwards, what do? We're like, man, that was fun. And we either before over coffee or afterwards, when the work is done, we just sit in chairs and we talk and we listen. I used to, and I might still like have a cigar with them. And like cigars, for whatever health problems it may cause you, cancer or whatever down the road, it makes you pause and stop. And it makes you sit there and it makes you talk to people and hopefully listen. And for me, it's like, it's amazing because I say, hey, you want to have a cigar with me, to another guy? And then they're like, sure. And we sit down and have a cigar. Now we're there for an hour. So we're talking and listening to all kinds of stuff. I'm picking up from a guy that's got, picking up information by listening to a guy that's got a stable and he keeps horses. We hang out and do bees together and stuff. Or the people in the pottery classes, what's going on in your life? What's good? What's exciting and new? And you get to people's lives and you get to listen. And the more you listen and the more you care, really, that's a foundational part of listening. The more you care, the more they're like getting into deep stuff, thinking about it, stuff they hadn't thought about before. Their hands are on the clay. You know, they're a little bit less distracted. So when you ask them, yeah, what was going on for you in that moment? Yeah, I was angry. I mean, I'm not surprised when they're coming out with the deep stuff, because I've surrounded them with good instruction, caring, listening, um, noticing. Because don't be don't be surprised that your ears are not your best listening tools. And they're good at it, and they're only for listening to audio. But your eyes are good at listening, and just as good and just as important, you know. And your subconscious is amazing at listening. It's picking up 40 million bits of information every second. It's picking up room temperature, probably their electromagnetic heartbeat, probably who knows what. We don't even know all the stuff it's picking up, but we know it picks up a lot. And so, use everything you have to listen. And even if you don't care and you don't know them and they're not from anywhere you place you've ever been, you can still, as you listen to them, you'll start to care. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting story. Tell me about that. Whatever it is, you know, how they got a scar or what their favorite TV show is. All of these things that people have in their lives, they're all able to be listened to. They're all able to gather information. Of course, I guess you could be gathering information for some malicious reason, as so many people are, like all the spam calls I get. Or you could be gathering information to help them, gathering information to understand them. And in the process, something else therapeutic happens. They hear themselves. They're forced, well, I don't know. It's not more like forced. It's more like they're drawn out and felt comfortable in hearing themselves. And all of a sudden they're like, well, when I say it like that, it sounds crazy. But that's how I'm living. Well, wait a minute. I don't want to live that way, or whatever. And they hear themselves. And when they hear themselves, then they're able to realize how they sound or how they feel. And I can't tell you how many people are like, I guess I am really stressed right now. It's like it's the biggest discovery when I know it as soon as they walk in the room. But it's because I listened to them and they heard themselves that they start solving their own problems. They start asking questions of themselves. They start becoming more aware. And these are some of the a small fraction of the wonderful positive effects that happen when you just listen and throw a little pebble in their pond. Like, I don't know, for instance, another one is, well, it sounds like, and this is a real life story. A guy was talking to me. I was like, it sounds like you're trying to treat a whole constellation of mental health symptoms. That sounds like PTSD to me and trauma. Maybe you should do EMDR. And what's EMDR? Eye movement, reprocessing, and desensitization. And true story, I just said that, the pebble in the pond, and this was years ago. And the guy, he got on it. He was like, he was already seeing a counselor. He was like, I want to do EMDR. Started changing the whole way he thinks and operates. And he's on no drugs. He's on no SSRIs, no illegal drugs, because he had, let's talk about some of the constellation of treatments he had going on. He had an SSRI, he had nicotine to get him back up again, he had weed to get him down, he had alcohol to straighten him out, he had, Xanax for this and something else for that. And when he needed to sleep, he took, another drug. And it was like, I'm trained as a counselor. So, but I told him, like, maybe EMDR. And now, let's say it's 5 or 6 years later, and we have coherent conversation. He's a functioning member of society on no substances at all. He's not depressed. He's not suicidal. He's not, he's out of a toxic relationship and single parenting his kids. And it's like, but that's the power of a pebble in a pond. And don't for a second think that's the power of Aaron Evans, because that's the power of the pebble in a pond and listening, so yeah, that's a legacy, I guess.
It's a legacy. Learning how to listen. I think it's key in our world. You said forgiveness earlier. That is my three big ones were gratitude, forgiveness, and empathy. And I think listening goes right along with empathy, because if you're going to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, or see it from their side, you have to listen to their side first off, right? You have to understand their side of the story. Did I freeze or?
I'm trying to get us back. No, I'm sorry, I'm back. I had a phone call. No, I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, All right.
But yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, we were like I was saying, you have to understand the other side, the other person's side of the story. I always say that I used to be like I was an ist. I was a sexist, misogynist, racist, whatever ist you can think of. But it was
yeah,
because I never really understood. I never listened to anybody. I didn't really care about listening to anybody. Why?
yeah,
Because I didn't have any gratitude for anything that happened. Why? Because I
yeah,
didn't forgive anybody. And learning those little things and learning how to listen, it's huge in life.
yeah. Well, and that brings me to a book that I recommend a lot. So I'll recommend it on your podcast, and that is Never Split the Difference. It's called Never Split the Difference.
Read it.
Gosh, the name's. Oh, you read it?
Yeah, I have read it. I can't think of the author either. He's a old time interrogator. He was an interrogator, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, no, he was a hostage negotiator for the
yeah, that's
FBI.
what it was. A hostage
Yeah.
negotiator. You're right. Yep. Great
Yeah.
book.
But yeah. But I was surprised to find that book was really all about listening. And the FBI discovered empathetic listening, and it changed how they negotiate for all time. And so, yeah, listening is powerful. There's so much
Even
there.
even with like your wife, right? Most of the time, if your wife comes in and she's pissed off or something, and she's starts chewing you out a little bit, your automatic response is to knee-jerk reaction. I didn't do that, blah 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 blah, and you get mad about it, and then you guys start a fight. But what I've learned now is like I listen to what she says and I say, "Hey, does that make you feel better? Or did that make you feel better? Blah blah blah, whatever." Or listen and have to, rearrange the question. But instead of being always on the defensive, I just sit
Right.
back, I listen, take that breath, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden that fight doesn't happen as often as it used to.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said and my wife and me are no longer like that, because it's because of listening. And and she still has, as all people, well, I don't know. It seems like distinctively woman, but I don't know. I'm not trying to judge or anything, but it seems like when they get hungry, they get a little grumpy. I don't know. I know that's how it is with my wife. And so, she comes at me. I can't believe, look at the way this house is. Look at this, look at that. I can't believe, you didn't take out the trash or whatever. And you know what exactly what I do? I start setting up my environment so that I can listen. And I'll clean up maybe put some stuff away for a minute, clean up a spot, go sit in a chair, aim it right at her and say, "Wow, I appreciate you sharing those feelings with me. It sounds like you're feeling, you know, kind of terrible or whatever." And or whatever fits. And she's like, "Yeah, because of this and that and the other." And I'm like, and I just want to, now we're at the point when I'm like, I just want to pause for a second. Like, when's the last time you ate? And she's like, I am hungry. Okay, I'll eat. And most of the time, I would say 98% of the time, she eats, and I'm like, okay, so what did you want to talk about? And she's like, no, nothing. I was just a little hangry or whatever. But that took some time to build up that awareness in her. So, you don't start off there. That's a nuclear weapon, right? You don't start off there with like, so are you hungry? Go get a Snickers, right?
Yeah. Are
That's
you
kind
on
of
the time of the
dismiss.
month?
Oh, yeah, that's all dismissive stuff. You don't want to be dismissive. You want to be open and welcoming, And so, whatever it is I'm doing, if in the middle of podcast she came around the corner and gave me a look, I say, we need to pause for a second. And I'd say, babe, what's going on? And so she knows I'm listening to all things. And she forgets I'm listening to all things. And so, she'll come to bed at night, and maybe we come to bed at separate times sometimes. She'll come to bed. I'm like, okay, you're laying here really still and quiet. I can hear your brain working right now. What's going on? And this is from a lot. I mean, when I say a lot of listening, I'm saying thousands of hours to this one person. And so with that thousands of hours, now we have shared awareness to where I can say, are you hungry? When's the last time you ate? And she just goes and gets a snack, right? And there's no fight or fuss. Matter of fact, there was going to be a fight. It's over already, but we have that shared listening time. Um, and we spend every day together, so, but anyway, but yeah, that listening and that paying attention, and it comes back, and yeah, just sit down, and there has not been a time to date of the worst situation and the worst conflict that I've had with her where me sitting down or even pulling over, I'm driving, she's talking about stuff, and I'm like, pull over, turn to face her as good as I can from the driver's seat and say, no, tell me about it. What's going on? And then she'll start to share with me what's going on. It's usually a little aimed at me, which is the part where it's easy to be defensive. But I know in my bones it's not me. Um, well, I'm a pretty good person. That's not working to try and piss her off. So, and I'm housebroken and everything else. So, by and large, I know it's generally not me. So that even opens it up more to say, huh, yeah, something's going on for you, isn't it? Well, come over here and sit by me and let's talk about it. I want to hear what's going on. And, when I hear, she hears. And so when I figure out what's going on for her, she's figuring it out at the same time. Well, I guess I really am working really hard on my college, and I guess the house is a little unorganized and we can put some stuff away. And I'm worried about what we're having for supper tonight, and I'm worried about what we're going to do at the family thing on Saturday. It's like, oh, okay. Wow, you're concerned about a lot of people at once, and I can kind of see it from a positive perspective. And it always comes back around, and I do what you do. At the end, I'm like, are you feeling better? And she's like, yeah, I feel a lot better. Thanks for listening. And I'm like, no, you're welcome. Thank you for sharing with me. And, you know, and it's not an ideal relationship, but it's definitely a test bed for listening practice.
It's huge. I think if a lot of people, because I, I'm not a marriage counselor, but I'd say a huge portion of fights is because there's a lack of communication, right? And it's
Right.
usually from a lack of listening. The talking part is usually not the problem because we're all running our lips about stupid shit that we shouldn't be running our lips about sometimes. But it's
Yeah.
about listening and actually truly listening to and it doesn't have to just be your wife. It can be your friends, man. Sometimes your friends are going through stuff and like when you listen to them, when you're actually hearing what they're saying, you figure out, man, there's something going on here. And then if
Yeah.
you're a good listener and a good question, asker, you can help them out. And it's pretty awesome when you step back and be able to listen. And those
Yeah.
questions you can almost ask, like you can, as long as you're doing it sincerely, right? Because you can ask those same questions that you were asking and come across like a smart ass. like
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about tone, right? And it's
it's
all
all
about,
about tone. It's all about sincerity. It's all about listening, man. And I really do like that. And then earlier you said something about everybody wants to be heard. I think in our world, man, if you look at you look at social media, you look at everything, everybody's always trying to put stuff out so they can feel
yeah.
like they're heard. And a lot of people try to make themselves more important than they actually should even be trying to be because they want to be heard.
Yeah.
I think, that act of kindness of just maybe that act of kindness should just be listening to people.
Yeah. Listening is the way we definitely can pay it forward, and with no strings attached, and people don't notice at a conscious level. It like impacts them seriously on a subconscious level, and they'll walk away and say, well, I don't know what to do with my problem, but I do know that Aaron cares about me. I do know that I feel really good when I hang out with this guy. I don't exactly know why, and then, and you're not, unless you make a point of it, they're not consciously aware of how good it is to be listened to. It's kind of it sneaks under the radar. So you can be as good a listener as you want, and you're never going to get caught, I guess, and you can continue to pay it forward without strings attached. And they keep coming back for more listening, and and it makes it sound like it's a drug deal or something, but it's not. It's good feelings and being able to process what's going on in your head, and nobody can do that. Everybody's yelling their main point, and nobody's listening. And if you really listen, everything they're about, because we're putting off so many signals in my face, what my hands are doing, what my feet are doing, if my arms are crossed, if I'm more open, if I'm looking away, or the recent one I learned is if they blink a lot, they're probably lying to you. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff I've learned. But I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to, for a brief moment, to the one starfish. You're picking up a starfish and throwing it out there, and it really doesn't tell. I mean, it doesn't tell the whole story, because one is never just one. And I think you said something about that a few minutes ago, where you're affecting one person right now in this moment, but they're going out. And as a person's listened to and hears himself, they become more self-aware. And then guess what they're doing? They're picking up starfish and throwing them in their own way. They're throwing them back. They're making a difference for people. And, it's almost like you change the world without even saying a word. Like, you're just listening. And you're silently and kind of covertly, I like to think of myself as a therapy ninja. Like, I sweep in for a second, I listen and I listen and I listen. I'm like, let me throw a pebble in your pond. And they go out and they're like, I don't know. I don't feel like smoking anymore. I don't know why. I did talk to Aaron, and we did do pottery, but we made pottery. That couldn't be it, and then they go about their life, crashing into people, doing good, the rest of their days. They go back to their family and they start listening. They go, and you get more confidence as you become more aware. You get more options as far as solutions and brainstorming. You get more creativity, and you become more productive and more efficient, and all of these. There's research out there on self-awareness, but yeah, helping somebody, throwing a pebble in one person's pond, and they go home and they raise their kids, and they go to a family reunion, and they go to work, and they take a little bit better person everywhere they go. And so it's never just one. It's always, who knows how many, but a lot. Is it changing the world? I don't know. A really meager estimate is yes. A really small estimate is yes. I don't even know what a big estimate is when it comes to listening.
What's that whole thing, the butterfly effect, right? Like the ripples of a butterfly's wings can cause a tornado. It's the same. It's how our life is. Just listening to one person, giving that act of kindness, having like what you were talking about earlier, just having people to be able to sit by their self or with their self and do that pottery and be able to focus on just that. That is huge in today's world, because most people's attention span, what is it? It's like down to 32 seconds, I think, is the average now. I don't even know. It might even be lower than that.
You got to get a hook in at 8 seconds is what I heard from an expert.
Yeah. So yeah, so you have to have a hook in by 8 seconds. And then most of the time, even when you have a hook, they're only giving you 32 to 35 seconds or whatever it is. So
yeah,
like to have somebody be able to sit there for 2 hours, 3 hours to do pottery, it is that calming of the mind. It's being able to even listen to yourself. And that's where I've learned with breathing, man. I could sit in a room, I could probably sit in a room the entire week and just sit here and breathe and listen to myself. If I didn't have to do anything, I'd be okay doing that. But I know people that cannot sit in there, in a room for 2 seconds without
Right.
having their phone, their music on, the TV on, something on, calling somebody.
Yeah.
And like, I bet if you measured the person, like if you measured my stress levels or cortisol levels compared to that person's, you're going to see a major difference.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
when you do that with the people with pottery, you're making a major difference in their life. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love it that they don't usually come back. I mean, that's weird, isn't it? It's weird to say that because everything in society is about repeat customers. Oh, get them coming back. You know, you want them to come back, get more stuff from you. You want them to run out, so they have to get more. You want their phone to be obsolete, so they have to buy a new one. You know, and there's so much of that, but it's so different when you're really trying to listen and help people because you're like, if they come back, they need more. If they leave and don't come back, then they got enough, you know. And isn't that that's such a different business model. I probably couldn't get a business loan if I tried on that business model, but I mean, it's great.
Mine is,
It's
yeah,
so,
the one shot pottery guy. You come once and don't come back. Yeah, you probably don't want to market it like that, but
no, I'll come back if they want me to, but yeah, but yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the starfish don't ever come back to help in the story, so
yeah, but maybe that starfish does something good for some other starfish down there or whatever it is, right?
well, yeah, they go have babies,
Yeah.
probably.
So I mean, like you said, man, it's doing that one act of kindness, that one, matters of one or matters to one. Do something nice to somebody during the day. You don't know how far along that's going to ripple out. Listen to people, have empathy, have forgiveness. Man, we could almost write the same book that I wrote. That
Uh-oh. Oh no. I don't want to be your
well,
competition. And let's work together.
yeah, I was gonna say we'll work together on it. But yeah, man, I mean, those are all things that I had to figure out to find that spot where I'm happy with myself now. It took a long
Yeah.
time for me to look in the mirror and go, I like that guy. He's cool. Or he does good stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people out there that are trying to find that,
Definitely. Millions, billions. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think there's too many people out there taking advantage of it by constantly making them have to come back, or they're not really listening, they're not trying to fix it. It's like our pharmaceutical companies, man. They don't try to fix shit. They just keep on giving it to you until you need more of something else.
Yeah.
And
That would, yeah.
I think
I was
even
going to say, I'm sorry.
go
I was
ahead.
going to say that'd be level zero listening, listening to sell. That's underneath below listening to argue in the hierarchy of listening. Like listening to sell you something's got to be the lowest form of listening. But that's what the
Well,
pharmaceuticals do. And go ahead.
yeah, I'm gonna go with you partially on that. If you're
Okay.
listening to actually sell you something that'll help you, right? Because if
Yeah.
there are certain people that listen and then they sell and you get helped and you get assistance and you get better out of it. So I think
Right.
there's two different levels of the sell, because
Yeah.
I a
Okay.
1,000% agree with you. There are people that listen just to sell you something to make money off of you, and that is the lowest form of listening.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. Listening to help you is definitely much higher up. And if they, I listen and I still got a honey list with 25 people on it that when I get honey in, they'll get honey. And what did I do? I told them like, yeah, I have bees and they make honey. I'm a beekeeper and I got a list and you can get on it and I'll sell you honey. So, but do I know honey's a superfood that will benefit them and also taste amazing? Yes, I do. So it's like selling them, life-giving elixir in a way, it's like, okay.
Do
I
you
mean,
do
but go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was asked. Same thing. I just didn't want you to move on before I. Do you do like bee pollen and stuff also?
Not right now. No, we just harvest the honey, and we're trying to split and grow like the amount of hives we have. And then I think we're primarily going to be, well, we got two branches, I guess, to make it sound official. One branch is going to be selling honey, and the other branch is going to be a public service, which is going and grabbing swarms or bees in somebody's house or something and putting them in a box and bringing them back. So, and we plan on doing that for free. Like we get bees out of it and they get no bees out of it.
Yeah.
And so everybody wins, you know. So
And they're
those are the
not
two
killing
branches.
and they're not killing the bees, or which are one of the most important little creatures in the world. I
Right.
love bees, man. I love some of the stuff about them. Like you might know this. It's a little off subject, but I heard that the bee, the way the hive is, structured like the little hexagon, is actually
Yeah.
due to the vibration of the wing. The flutter of the wing causes the vibration, which makes the shape of the hexagon.
Hmm. I
I,
haven't
I'm,
heard that.
I'm, huh?
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard anything against it. I mean, I do know that they shoot panels of beeswax out of their abdomen, and then they come out straight, and they just kind of assemble them, and they glue them together. And so they squirt these straight sheets of wax out, and then they just put them together to form the hexagon, and then they
Huh.
glue them to the board. Um, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard but about the vibration of their wings. I know they beat their wings 320 times a second, something like 280 times a second. And the wings are part of their honey production, and the wings are part of keeping the hive at exactly 90, well, between 95 and 97 degrees Fahrenheit year round. In the dead of winter to the heat of summer, they keep it at 95 to 97 degrees Fahrenheit. And
Isn't
their
that
wings are
crazy?
the biggest part of that. Yeah. Yeah, they've got a lot of really advanced technology in them, which is interesting. They've got, GPS mapping. They've got, they produce propolis, honey, and beeswax um, from pollen and honey from flowers, essentially. Um, yeah, they got temperature regulation and control. They've got, so many technologies that we barely have an idea how they work. And smelling, they smell 100 times. They sense smells 100 times better than a human does. So, and it's through their antenna of all things. They don't even have a nose, but through their antenna they detect these smells. Um, yeah, so I could go all day on bees, but I haven't heard
Yeah.
about vibrations of the wings. But it is supposedly a healing vibration. Listening to them is supposed to help you feel better. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I know
Oh,
being
hey,
a
look,
beekeeper.
we
Go
turned it
ahead.
back around to listening. That was awesome.
Yeah. I love listening to the bees. On my TikTok channel, I have some videos where I just video them and then put some smoke in the hive, and they buzz really loud. It's kind of like a fire alarm. And when they do, though, it's such a pleasant sound. After you realize they're not angry with you and they're not trying to kill you, then you realize it's such a pleasant sound. I had to move through that process, but yeah, they're fascinating creatures, and you know how they give directions?
Nope.
Okay, so let's say they go out and they find a patch of flowers. I mean, there's a whole field of flowers, and they're looking for flowers, and the scout will come back. It'll come into the hive. Well, apparently there's a little bit of direction giving it does outside the hive, flying in circles in proportion to the sun to give other bees that are outside flying directions. Then it comes into the hive, and you'll never guess what it does. The little worker bee, female, she walks one direction, a certain amount of inches or parts of an inch. Then she turns, walks the other direction, and then she turns. And that's how they give directions. But how they say how many flowers there are is the fun part. Let me explain it to you before I tell you in human terms. So I'm saying where the 7-Eleven is. So I get up and you're like, where is that 7-Eleven? And I'm like, and you're like, oh, okay, it's over there by the Walmart. They dance, and the amount they shake their booty, I'm not making this up, tells the other bees how big of a find it is. So if they're doing a little walk down and walk back and their butt is shaking back and forth, then they're telling everybody that's where the stuff is.
Hmm.
And it is so crazy that they communicate by dancing.
Hey, man,
By
there's
dancing.
civilizations that's how they communicated with their dance, right? They pass it on from generation to generation by different
Yeah.
dances. It's kind of interesting. That
Reminds me
that
of
is
Native Americans. Yeah.
that is pretty freaking cool, man. I did not know
Yeah.
that. Look at that. I learned something new today. That is freaking awesome.
I mean, you can learn anything if you can listen, and it appears that you're a pretty good listener. So there you go.
Sometimes. Sometimes. Hey, wrap it up for me, Aaron. Give me your three top things that you would like to share with a gentleman. It could be that one matters, the listening. Listening's definitely one of them. So that's probably your number one, right? So just wrap it up with your three top things.
Sure. So yeah, listening would definitely be number one. Listen more. Practice listening in short amounts, and then I would say, yeah, make a difference for that one. Like, don't be afraid to pay it forward. Don't be afraid to take an extra minute. Don't be afraid to help somebody else out. And we're all taught, right? Don't do CPR on a person. They'll sue you because they wanted to die. Or if you accidentally broke their ribs or something. And it's like we're all so afraid to help each other out. And it's really not that. The world doesn't seem to be that way. So don't be afraid to help people out, pay it forward. Don't be afraid to chuck that one starfish, that lonely one starfish back into the ocean, or find a person in your life, that one lonely person. And I mean, that's good listening practice. So, and they win and you win, and you probably learn 10 things too in the process. So, yeah, listening is my first, second, and third items.
It works, man. That works with me. I'm sure somebody's going to get something out of that if they listen, right? If they listen, they're going to learn something from this. And Aaron, I appreciate it because I learned a little bit too, man. Sometimes I do have a struggle with listening, and I find myself like kind of boop-a-doo, but you know what? I'm going to work on it a little bit more. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you. Is there
yeah,
a
no
good
problem.
spot? Is there a good spot to reach you at?
What do you mean by spot?
Like, do you have a
Oh,
website? How do people get in hold of you?
yeah. Okay. So I do have a website. It's www.yahwehpottery.com, and Yahweh is spelled Yahweh. It's yeah, it's ancient Hebrew, so it's tricky. So yahwehpottery.com, and also I have an email. Oh, what is it? It's yahwehpottery.com at gmail.com. So there you go. Yeah, no, it's yahwehpottery@gmail.com. I'm sorry, I got that wrong.
Get all the information from him and put it in the description on this podcast. Because there's no way in hell I remember how to spell it. So I'll have
Okay,
that description down there. We can link it up. And Aaron, I appreciate it. And hopefully you enjoyed the show. Have a
it was fun.
wonderful day.
Thank you.